Buenas and Hafaday. Thank you all for being here this morning. The Committee on Higher Education and the Advancement of Women, Youth, and Senior Citizens will now convene this virtual information hearing. Today is Thursday, July 30th, 2020, and today is October 5th, 2020, and the time now is 10:02 a.m. For the record, and in accordance with the Open Government Law, public notices were sent out via email to all senators, stakeholders, and all main media broadcasting outlets on Monday, September 28th, 2020, for the 5-day notice, and the second notice on Wednesday, September 30th, 2020, for the 2-day notice. Notice of today's virtual informational briefing was also available on the Guam Legislature's website. Joining me for today's virtual informational briefing are Senator Therese Terlahi, Senator Telo Taitagui, and Senator Mary Camacho Torres. Sizuos Masi, colleagues, for being here today. Before we proceed with the virtual informational briefing, the legislature has general rules of conduct that must be followed. All must abide by the rules of conduct and quality assurance standards. Please keep video on at all times and ensure you are in a room with little interruption and adequate lighting, specifically to make sure the participant's face is visible at all times. The host of this hearing will mute participants until called upon the chair. When called to speak, please ensure that you are unmuted and that you are speaking into your microphone. Members of the committee wishing to speak may indicate via the in-app feature chat box. Individuals testifying shall first be recognized by the chair before speaking and shall state their name for record-keeping purposes. The order of questioning will begin with the panel of senators who shall complete their lines of questioning for each respective item on the agenda. Upon completion of the panel's line of questioning, the chair will also pose questions. Each member will be allowed to pose a question to an individual testifying for a round and will be provided another round if needed. Questions and testimony shall be confined to the substance or nature of the agenda. Personal inference as to the character or the motive of any senator or any individual testifying is not permitted. Any violation of this general rule of conduct will result in removal from the public hearing by the host. I'd like to welcome all those from the Department of Education who are with us today. Chairwoman of the board, Maria Gutierrez, Vice Chair, Mark Mendiola, Superintendent John Fernandez, and his administration. Thank you very much for being here this morning. I've called this a virtual informational briefing to provide parents, students, all GDOE stakeholders, and the people of Guam an update on the Guam Department of Education's progress as we reach the near beginning of a new quarter in the school year, which we are while we still face the COVID-19 pandemic. I'd like to first acknowledge the personnel, teachers, and administrators within the department who provide continuous service and support to all our students and parents on Guam, as well as parents and extended family for helping continue the education in the home setting. The pandemic presents a significant challenge that is unique to everyone, including our educators, administrators, and most especially our students and parents at home. In order to ensure sustainable and effective education to all students, as we acknowledge the progress the department has made this school year, it is also equally important to hear the challenges that raise concerns from our stakeholders. The Guam Department of Education has been working actively with all stakeholders by providing continuous service and support and making necessary adjustments as sudden changes arise during the pandemic. In regards to the progress of the GDOE beginning August 31st, 2020, the U.S. Department of Education has removed the requirement for the TPFA oversight of the physical inventory process for a 6-month probationary period, which in turn will save the department millions of dollars that can instead be invested in teachers and students. Earlier in the year, the federal government approved around $31 million for GDOE to be used to support distance learning, as well as for health and safety supplies, materials, equipment, technology, and wellness support. In addition, GDOE has publicly announced its distribution implementation plan to deploy 8,000 computers to middle and high school students and teachers from its inventory throughout the island. The mode of learning since the beginning of the school year has been primarily shifted to full home learning model. Because of the shift of learning models from traditional learning face-to-face, we acknowledge that some students have been unaccounted for in different schools since the beginning of the school year, potentially limiting their access to education. In order to ensure that the students on Guam are receiving an effective education despite lockdowns and a shift in the mode of learning this school year, it is important to discuss with the people of Guam the implementation plans and an update on future plans as we head towards this end of this year. Today's virtual information briefing will provide discussions on the Guam Department of Education's third-party fiduciary agent status report, an update on the allocation of CARES Act funds, technology support for personnel and students, and a status update of enrollment for unaccounted students. I hope that everyone at home listening will better understand GDOE's plans and measures toward providing quality and effective learning opportunities to every student on Guam. So, Mr. Superintendent, I believe the chair of the board will yield to you to provide your testimony.
Good morning and half a day, Senator Shelton, Acting Committee Chair Shelton, and members of the committee. Before I start, and in addition to the chair and the vice chair being present, let me also just briefly introduce the team that's with us today who may be here to address questions that you might have through the course of today's briefing. And that includes Deputy Superintendent Zenny Asuncion, who is responsible for finance and administrative services. Deputy Superintendent Erica Cruz, responsible for educational support and community learning, and Deputy Superintendent Joe Sanchez, responsible for curriculum and instruction. Also with us, Frank Cooper Nurse, who is our Chief Auditor and worked very closely on our third-party issues. We also have Rachel Duenas, who is the Acting Administrator of Federal Programs, and he is here to answer questions about our federal funds through the CARES Act. And then Doris Bugacosa, who leads our student community outreach. I'm trying to keep track of the latest iteration, but basically in charge of our outreach efforts to our community, and is basically working on our initiative to try to track down the students that were unaccounted for early on this school year. So as we get into the question and answers, each of them will be available to join in at the requisite level of detail that the legislature would seeks. So that said, I'll go ahead and just go through the testimony as you indicated, Acting Chair, on the with regard to the individual issues, and then I'll just stop after every section to take any questions. But as you can see from what I transmitted to the legislature and hopefully available to you and your colleagues, not just the testimony, but there were some attachments as well. And so please note that those attachments are there for your review, today or at your leisure. So thank you again for the opportunity to present information at today's virtual informational briefing. Again, today I'm prepared to cover the issues, provide updates on the following matters, including the third-party fiduciary agent, allocation of CARES Act funds, technology support for personnel and students, and enrollment of students who were previously not accounted for during the initial weeks of the school year. So to begin with, I wanted to start with a third-party fiduciary agent status report. Because this is also for the general public, I did want to give some brief history so people understand what we're dealing with. And as you're aware, this requirement for a third-party fiduciary agent really stemmed from an on-site visit in 2009, during which the U.S. Department of Education found that GDOE had failed to implement its comprehensive corrective action plan that had been developed to address areas of high risk within GDOE. USAID also found that staff directly responsible for these grants were not trained to address the areas in the corrective action plan, and that operational internal controls had yet to be established. So in 2010, USAID imposed a special condition requiring the hiring of a TPFA, and later that year, GDOE was able to contract with Alvarez and Marsal to serve as a TPFA to oversee financial management of our educational grants. So it's 2020, so Alvarez and Marsal has served continuously as the TPFA for GDOE for the past 10 years. Over this period of time, GDOE has paid A&M a total of $26.3 million. During the first 2 years of A&M's contract, GDOE was able to use $8.3 million in American Recovery and Reinvestment Act funds. So these are federal dollars to cover the TPFA costs. But after those first 2 years, GDOE was then required to utilize our local funds to cover the cost of the third-party requirement. And we've been required to pay $18 million in local funds so far to support the TPFA requirement in order to access over $45 million in ED grants annually. And those $45 million consists primarily of our consolidated grant and then our special education grant dollars. Currently, the contract with A&M is approximately $2.5 million per year. Early on in the contract, in our relationship, it had been between $4 to $5 million a year, and then steadily we've been able to bring that cost down. And so the latest contract is at $2.5 million. As part of its scope of work, A&M is responsible for preparing and submitting requests to US DOE for drawdowns, for maintaining separate bank account and general ledgers for ED grant funds, for making direct payments to vendors, for reviewing GDOE's payroll reimbursement requests, for assisting the receiving and property management divisions with standard operating procedures for fixed assets, and assisting GDOE in transitioning responsibilities to address the GDOE's high-risk designation. Over the past 10 years, GDOE has worked to implement again, we call it the CCAP, which is our Comprehensive Corrective Action Plan, in order to progress to a point where USAID would reconsider the special conditions imposed on GDOE grants. That progress has included the implementation of a modernized financial management system, development and updating of standard operating procedures, regular training for personnel, and the expansion of the internal audit function within the department. In 2018, based on the progress made, GDOE officially requested USAID's reconsideration of the 7 special conditions imposed upon the department. To date, 4 special conditions have been addressed and acknowledged by USAID to have been met. These include the requirement for a timely single audit, prompt access to information, compliance with program-specific requirements, and compliance with grant-specific requirements. That leaves 3 key special conditions, which include the most important ones: the requirement for a third-party fiduciary agent. A second condition includes the scope of activities outlined for the TPFA and GDOE. And then the third one is the CCAP, which has since been replaced by what we are calling the Reconsideration Evaluation Plan, that was basically been implemented as part of the process for reconsideration. We've been able to communicate directly with Assistant Secretary Frank Brogren, who was in charge of elementary and secondary education for the U.S. Department of Education. And he was able to work with USAID staff and GDOE to establish the REP as the final roadmap to determine whether GDOE had made sufficient progress for the removal of the TPFA and the full return of financial grant oversight and responsibility to GDOE. I think I just want to say that the CCAP and our ability to complete the CCAP was a little bit more ambiguous, less time specific, and the REP itself, even though it added a lot more detail to what we needed to complete, set also in place the timelines and the process for validating each of the items that were laid out. So the REP was approved and implemented in January 2019 and required GDOE to submit various forms of evidence to be evaluated by USAID through the following months. So basically over the past year and a half, the relationship has been virtual for the most part, because what we do is typically submit electronically the evidence of progress, and the US Ed has been able to do virtual review and validation for many of those items. As GDOE has worked to complete the REP, US Ed committed to an on-site visit intended to provide final determination regarding GDOE's progress and to help in US Ed's decision to remove the remaining special conditions. So in addition to the virtual validation, we were supposed to get an on-island visit. That on-site visit was scheduled for April 2020, but due to the onset of the COVID-19 global pandemic, the trip was postponed indefinitely. So not wanting to lose the opportunity for some type of assessment, I requested that USED conduct a virtual monitoring during the summer, which did take place in mid-July 2020, led by USED's Risk Management Services Division. In August 2020, the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Grants Administration and Acting Deputy Assistant Secretary for Acquisition Management, Jim Stater, issued the letter which conveyed the result of USED's reconsideration evaluation plan virtual monitoring back in July. The letter highlighted that GDOE has completed several areas in the REP, which are subject to transitioning off the third-party oversight. As a first step in this transition, as you mentioned, USED has agreed to allow a 6-month probationary period for GDOE to complete its current physical inventory of fixed assets without the oversight of the third party. Should GDOE meet USED's performance expectations through this period ending January 31st, 2021, GDOE expects that property management will be the first area to formally exit third-party oversight. Among the central issues that need to be addressed, to complete the REP, is GDOE's employee time tracking processes, which GDOE agrees and is working to address through an initiative to automate employee time and attendance, beginning with the pilot program focused on key projects within the consolidated grant, and then expanding to all USED grant activities once implementation has been tested. The contract for the employee time tracking automation was just recently executed, and the pilot project should be implemented before the end of the calendar year. USED has been supportive of this automation solution, and should the automation go well, GDOE expects that the REP requirements for employee time tracking will be met and surpassed. We will be requesting another virtual monitoring visit sometime early in 2021 in order to address the remaining issues in the REP. And at that point, we expect that the REP will be substantially complete, subject to USED's final concurrence. And by that, we do believe that with the final concurrence, we do mean that we should have had validation that we've completed the REP, and we should be closer to that discussion of the removal of special conditions. I would like to take the time to thank Governor Lou Leon Guerrero, Vice Speaker Talina Nelson, Congressman Mike San Nicolas, and Public Auditor Benjamin Cruz for writing letters of support to Secretary Betsy DeVos on behalf of GDOE. We believe that these letters of support, showing a strong and united approach from the various parts of our government, have been instrumental in ensuring that GDOE is given an appropriate level of attention and consideration by our federal partners. A copy of our letter from USED is attached. So with that, Madam Chair, we're available for questions on that matter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Superintendent. I know that many of our senators are pleased to hear the progress that you've made and this good news. And we did all sign on to a resolution several months ago to support this move away from the high-risk designation. So I'll open it up for questions, beginning with Senator Terlahi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Superintendent, and to your team, I have no questions on that, but just wanted to say thank you very much and congratulations on your progress so far, and looking forward to the early 2021 visit.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Terlahi. Senator Taitukwi.
Madam Chair. I also like to thank Mr. Cooper Nurse, for all his hard work on this. I know he's on it constantly and trying to find a way that we can fast track this. And I know you guys were on the road of trying to do this last year, and then COVID hit. So now it's time to coexist with COVID and see how we can move forward and get out of this receivership here, there was something in the letter that was provided from the U.S. Department of Education on the first page where it's, I think it was on the second paragraph toward the end where it says other items that will be reduced or transitioned back to Guam DOE are noted in the updated REP attached. I don't see an attachment here. Was there an attachment provided?
Oh, let me see. I don't know if that was attached to the letter that I sent, but yeah, there is an attachment that should come, and I'm happy to forward that along. Those would be a level of details. I believe they were talking about certain areas in procurement, as well as they mentioned indirect costs, as well as another area where they felt that GDOE had made progress. And then there are some items there that we still are working to complete, most notably the employee time tracking issues that we're going to hope to complete these next few months. But I definitely will forward that along.
Yeah, and if possible, Frank, if you happen to have that with you, you can also put it on the chat. It's as easy. I love this Zoom thing because you can put it on the chat and we can download it ourselves, and so you don't have to worry about. But if you happen to have it right now, I greatly appreciate if you can put it on the chat. This is really important. We're all in support of trying to take all this money that we're utilizing for this third party and put it into DOE. So whatever we need to do to make this happen, I stand ready to assist in any way I can. But yeah, thank you so much for all your hard work. And thank you, Frank, for overseeing this too as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I think Senator, thank you. And a couple of the issues that did affect us this year definitely was the inability for US DOE to come physically and as they had committed to the island. And so again, that was supposed to take place in April. And we definitely didn't want to go another year or wait until COVID-19 was gone to have them visit. So we did ask them, even though it was a little different type of a visit, to do a virtual monitoring, in which they did do. And we had to operate off of 2 time zones to get that done. And so again, we're at a point that we've never been before, and some of these things are still uncertain for us in terms of how USAID will like to proceed. We do view it as somewhat good news that there is some type of a process that's been laid out for fixed assets. Even though we would prefer an immediate relief from the special conditions, the 6-month period of transition, well, again, we'll work on that to make sure that we do well during that 6-month probation, so that there is at least a template for how these items get returned back to GDOE. And if that works, then we look to expand that to all the other areas where we have completed the work that's been required by US DOE. So that's at least at least something at the end of the tunnel we can look forward to. But again, keep in mind, this has never been done. So this template is being created for the first time, which is good and bad for Guam. So,
yeah.
Thanks for your support.
You're welcome. And technology definitely is our best friend, and we need to really embrace it and thinking outside the box to get this done. But we stand ready to assist in any way. Thank you so much, Superintendent, and everyone here, the deputies, as well as those who are on this chat. Thank you so much for all your hard work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Taichigui. Senator Torres.
Thank you. Congratulations on the progress that you've made, Mr. Fernandez. And I also find it very useful and helpful that you give us the letters also for our reference from Jim Stadler, Stater, for example. I don't have any questions. I just, appreciate being able to listen and get an update.
Yeah, thank you. And again, just one thing again, as we look forward to the next few months, and especially we have an opportunity to update again. We have not yet, but we will be trying to negotiate a second virtual monitoring visit that will hopefully help us close out additional areas in the rep. And again, we hope that'll take place right around the end of the probationary period, so that we don't wait too long after the probationary period to get the next decision, which we hope will be relief from those special conditions. And then we'll go from there. So we'll be happy to keep you updated as we go through the process. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you very much, Senator Torres. I'd like to acknowledge Senator Sabina Paris for joining us. Senator, we're at the end of the first round of questions regarding the third-party fiduciary agent. If you have any specific question for DOE. Okay, thank you. Mr. Superintendent, are there any functions of the third-party agent that you can anticipate needing to fill positions for at the department to take over?
So we do. So first of all, as it relates to the third party contract, just for the good of the record, we are that contract. Unlike many other contracts, actually runs from, I believe, November 1st. For its yearly term, and then renewals after that. And so we are actually in the process of renegotiating the renewal for this coming year. So we're hopefully going to see some savings from the 2.5 million that we are currently paying. But until that negotiation is over, I won't be able to clarify what that savings will be. And then going forward, we've been in the discussion. The board is in this discussion as well with regard to ensuring that we have sufficient capacity to maintain the functions of the third party. And we're right now working through that with the third party in USAID as we go through these final validations, because part of the final review is really anticipating where in the organization these functions will be addressed and handled. One of the focal points for us in that strategy is our internal audit office. So the internal audit office, which had a much narrower scope when I first came in, is now a little bit larger, definitely stronger, and definitely aligned with the high risk areas. So they've been really critical in this improvement strategy. And so one of the focal points of our transition effort is to look within the internal audit office to ensure that functions that can be transitioned there to provide that monitoring and review for the organization can reside there. And then other than that, we are looking at our various business and finance functions to make sure that we have adequate capacity in terms of people who are hired and trained to transition from the third party. So we do have, I believe we've had several employees who have been training with the third party and shadowing the third party with regard to their functions, so that when it comes time to transition, then that we can have that automatic capacity already within our current employees. With regard to additional employees, that's an ongoing discussion with the board. We've been working to determine what areas we might need to shore up as we transition. And and as we get to those recommendations with the board, we'll be happy to share with you what those additional needs are. We do hope that the majority of the funds we can return to the schools. So that's really our focus. But again, given our budget situation this year and our discussion with the board, we have a shared concern that we don't slip backwards in terms of central office capacity to make sure that we don't fall backwards in terms of the federal grant administration and function.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm glad to hear that you are planning for this transition so that we can continue to build on the progress and not lose any momentum here. And it sounds like you also have plans for what we want to see happen from the savings when we renegotiate this contract. Can you mention how much we anticipate saving?
Well, I can't yet, but hopefully by the time we finish the negotiation, because we're not at a final number yet, but we definitely want it to come down below, of course, the 2.5 million that we currently pay. But we're right now, that renewal needs to happen before the end of October. So within a month's time, I can let you know.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, and we will move on to our next topic, Mr. Superintendent, the update on the allocation of CARES Act funds within the department.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In July, GDOE provided this committee with copies of our approved grant application, as well as the allocation of funding per school. As you recall, the CARES Act Education Stabilization Fund allocated $54 million to Guam, with $41.5 million going to GDOE as a state education agency, and $12.5 million going to the governor for her use for educational purposes. The funds are intended to address the impact of COVID-19 on education and to support the education systems of Guam as we work to protect students and employees, provide distance learning opportunities, and plan for reopening when the pandemic subsides. GDOE's approved agreement with the USAID prioritizes school safety, distance learning, and social-emotional support for students and employees. The funds and approved activities supporting GDOE's public schools also apply to charter schools as well as private schools. So there is an attached chart as a reference. I think it's similar. The allocation should be similar to what we shared in July. And then there's an updated table with regard to the obligation and encumbrance of those funds. So as of September 30th, 2020, the GDOE's expenditure and requisitions activity under the ESF SEA funds, which is the 41.5 million, reflects that 65.5% have been expended or is in the process of being encumbered. This amounts to over $27.2 million in total expenditure and requisitions that are being used to provide direct support for distance learning technology, tools, and resources, as well as to purchase health and safety supplies and equipment, i.e. personal protective equipment, for all GDOE public schools and participating charter and private schools. The allocation of resources to schools is based on enrollment and on their specific requests and needs. The distance learning supports include the procurement of laptops, tablets, internet tools and resources, instructional supplies and materials for teachers and students, hard copy instructional booklets for students, and online subscriptions. Personal protective equipment procurement activities support all students, faculty, staff, as well as ancillary personnel, and include thermal scanners, hand sanitizers, disposable and reusable masks, disposable gloves, disinfectant supplies and services, alcohol wipes and sprays, plexiglass protective shields, and plexiglass doors and medical grade supplies necessary for nurses and isolation rooms. The remaining 14.3 million represents the balance of funds that will be spent for additional distance learning support and services for our community learning centers, student instructional materials, online subscriptions, additional laptops and tablets, as well as PPE supplies and services to get us through the rest of the school year. So with that, Madam Chair, that's an update, and we're happy to answer any question about the CARES Act funding.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much, Mr. Superintendent. Maybe you can also just read the next part of your testimony regarding the technology support for personnel and students, since this is tied together with the CARES Act funding, and then we'll have a round of questions.
Certainly. Heading into school year 2020-21, GDOE had planned for implementation of 3 models of learning, including online distance learning, hard copy distance learning, and then face-to-face classroom instruction on alternating schedules. As a result of the return of the island to PCOR 1, based on the governor's executive order, I informed GDOE schools that face-to-face instruction was no longer allowed and that all GDOE schools would implement distance learning and try to move face-to-face students onto one of the 2 distance learning options. Even as that process was taking place, we also experienced short-term disruption of our hard copy distributions due to the nature of the PCOR 1 restrictions during the first weeks of school. So based on the need and desire to strengthen and expand the online distance learning option, and again, because face-to-face and hard copy, the options seem to be less reliable or not allowed at all during those first weeks, we really focused on how we could accelerate the expansion and strengthening of the online option. So on August 28th, we issued a press release informing all GDOE stakeholders of our plans internally to deploy laptops and tablets to students and families to further support students with remote learning tools and resources. So we definitely understand that the lack of technology resources, such as the laptop and tablet equipment, is a key obstacle for students who wish to participate in the online distance learning option. And we had initially planned for a gradual expansion of the online program as we started to bring in new equipment for students over the course of the first semester and then throughout the school year. However, due to the return of the island to PCOR 1, we felt the urgency of expanding the program as soon as possible, including deployment of existing computers that are already in our schools. So our focus at this point is to provide available equipment to our secondary students in the hard copy option, and then we will work on expanding distribution as we get more equipment later in the year. The first weeks of September were used to accelerate the planning and organizing of the laptop distribution. And I guess what I mean by that is that we had a 2 to 3 month schedule for moving through this process of procuring and distributing the equipment. And now the directive was to try to do this within the next 2 to 3 weeks. So a lot of that time we spent in September was staff reorienting themselves to that directive and accelerating the planning. So starting September 21, all DOE schools and divisions were prepared to begin the assessment and identification of operable laptops for distribution. These laptops are comprised of equipment purchases no earlier than 2017 that were distributed to schools for use in the classroom. And as you'll guess, these are largely equipment funded by our consolidated grant as we've been working to expand our in-school use of technology. So given that face-to-face instruction was no longer readily available as an option, these equipment were not going to be used at the schools. And so we felt they needed to be repurposed for distribution, reorganized to support the secondary schools, prepared for distribution to students along with the necessary documentation for accountability purposes, and then distributed safely to eligible students within the parameters of the current public health emergency. I wanted to lay that out there because I think as we discussed the deployment, I know a lot of people wanted to see it happen right away, but it really is a large operation to think through the review of what assets are in the department. Again, these assets are in elementary as well as secondary schools, to determine the operability of these assets, to gather them and to redistribute them to the secondary schools, to reach out to the students to determine their interest in receiving the laptops, preparing the accountability framework to ensure that we were accountable for these federal assets, and then of course determining how we would distribute these assets during PCOR 1, where we're still basically shut down. So last week, the applications for laptops were made available for completion and return, and the distribution started last week at certain schools, and they're ongoing at the school level. We anticipate distribution of approximately 8,000 laptops. Now that's just our estimate. Again, as we go through the operation, we'll get a better number of the actual assets that met the requirements and were able to be distributed. But that's our estimate based on our records. And we will be working to ensure the smooth transition of students onto the online learning option as we close out the first quarter and begin the second quarter later in October. We know that there are not currently enough laptops for all students. So for now, we are prioritizing secondary students who have no access to equipment, but who do have access to internet services. As new equipment comes in, we will be able to expand distribution, and we are also working with the governor to support the effort to expand internet access for those families who do not currently have service. So a copy of our technology distribution plan is also attached for your information.
Thank you very much, Mr. Superintendent. I'd like to recognize the Speaker Tina Munoz-Barnes, for joining us. And we will have a round of questions for the CARES Act funding and technology support for personnel and students now. Speaker, if you have a question, or I can come back to you. Okay.
Please come back to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker. Senator Terlahi.
Thank you very much. Mr. Superintendent, thank you. And for the 8,000 approximate laptops that you are distributing and prioritizing secondary students, how many of the secondary students have you identified to be in need of those? In other words, how many are we going to be taking care of with the 8,000? What percentage?
I'll let Deputy Sanchez answer in more detail, but again, with the 8,000 and with our analysis of the students who had registered already for either online hard copy or face-to-face, we felt that there might be the possibility of meeting all the needs of the secondary students. But again, it's all going to be based on the actual number of applications we receive, and then the actual number of assets that end up being operable and able to be distributed. So I don't know if we have an update on unexpected numbers, but Joe, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, the number that we're working off operationally is 8,000 to 9,000 hard copy students for secondary schools, which means if we get the exact amount of technology to them, we should cover a large majority of them. The only factors that are kind of an X factor there is there are a good number of online students who are actually using their cell phones. And this is documented much earlier on in the year. So we know that they're not just saying they're using their cell phones. We knew that they were using their cell phones already for several weeks. So we're getting laptops to those students as well. Also, there's a number of hard copy students who are actually have online access and have no problem with online access, but they just choose to be in the hard copy component. So we're trying to look at a couple of policy proposals, like one of our policy proposals that we're discussing with the teachers and the board, and we're going to discuss with parents, is to completely do away with the hard copy component once we can ensure that we have enough laptops for the students, and not make it a choice. Because to be quite upfront, and teachers will say this, parents will say this, the hard copy component is a very difficult component to implement and maintain. Logistically, it's very difficult because of the making copies. I mean, these copies are worth thousands of dollars if you were to go like 5 cents per page and things like that. So it's very expensive. It's time consuming. It requires a lot of work with the staff to coordinate the packets and to make the copies and things like that. As well as academically, we know it's the weakest, the one where there's not much interaction with the teacher and the students. And even when you do reach out by phone, the phone conversations are kind of just quick, and if the parents ask questions, and sometimes they don't ask questions, so it's very difficult to implement. So we want to move away as much as possible from the hard copy component. And when we do that, I think it would obviously not make it a choice, and then people can actually take the make sure that they actually get the laptops, because we are hearing anecdotally that there are some families and some students that just don't want to apply for a laptop because they believe that hard copy is easier. And for the students who are not struggling, like the students who are not struggling, who can do the material on their own, admittedly, it is easier. I mean, you take the work and you just do it and you turn it in. So we want to create a combination of incentives and disincentives so that more people will move away from the hard copy piece.
All right, can I ask when you then how, well, I guess you're still assessing, but when will you be done distributing for the secondary school this amount of laptops?
So we've never done this before, so we tried to be very flexible with the schools. I mean, we're putting pressure, positive pressure on them to get them out, but at the same time, logistically, they're trying to manage all of the instructional pieces as well as the technology distribution. We have 2 schools that I know of now that are already distributing, and we're giving them the rest of the next two weeks to at least give us an idea of when they started, how often and how much could they distribute at the same time. So right now we don't have a very strong target, but we're trying to push the schools to give us at least some data as to how fast they can get it out.
I think Senator, I know that Senator, I know that JFK reported that in their first couple of days they were able to get out about 50 a day. So that kind of gives you an estimate, because they don't just run by and pick it up. They have to go through the process of going in, making sure they fill out their documents and so forth.
All right, and the Wi-Fi distribution, when do you said you're working with the governor's office on Wi-Fi, I'm sorry, internet distribution. When do you expect that to be done?
Let me start, and Joe can get into the details of that, just because I feel bad because his staff has been really tasked with accelerating all of the work. And then on top of that, we recently found out, I would just say 2, maybe 3 weeks ago at the most, that the intention for the governor was to subgrant the funds to us for us to handle the projects for procuring. So it really has been just in the last 3 weeks where the team has been scrambling to put together the scope of work for the home internet access procurement, which is where they're at. So Joe, I don't know if you have an update, but I just want to say that because in addition to the laptop distribution and the internet, a lot of this, which we had planned to take over several months into the first, during the first semester, we've told everybody to step on it, and they've been doing a great job, but there's only so many people in the office. So Joe, do you have an update on the discussions for the procurement of the home internet?
Yeah, so the design that we decided to use was a model where it would also be needs-based. Some of the other examples would be looking at eligibility, who would be able to participate in a program like this. And we were thinking about some criteria, like if they're under GURA, they're under SNAP, or under one of these programs, they would automatically be eligible. as well as if they're not under any of these programs, utilizing like our Head Start criteria. Once we identified those individual students, we have kind of a tier design where it would either be subsidized the entire amount of the Wi-Fi signal at home or partial. And then the intent is to make sure that the families in most need would be able to get that additional help. We're looking at, right now the system is closed for requisitions, but I believe it's opening up on October 16th. Once our procurement system is ready for requisitions to be entered, we already have a draft scope of services that we intend to put in there. And then once it's put in, it would be however much it would take for the procurement process. We're hoping anywhere from a month to 6 weeks. We do have a good report, and I don't want to steal her thunder, but I know special education actually did this a little earlier. So special education had a separate set of funding that they're using for, I believe, 500 students to get home internet access. And that is already in the procurement stage. And I believe they're coming up with a purchase order soon. So for special education students, for students who need Wi-Fi access at home based on their IEP, that should be available within the next couple of weeks.
Yes, Senator, I think it's public record already, and if not, it's public record because I might have said it publicly already. But I don't want to speak on behalf of the governor because I think they are still waiting for final approval. I haven't heard that they had final approval from US DOE on their proposal, but they have set aside around 8 million of that 12 million to support home internet access, and I think additional some support of that to support our community learning centers. Idea with some of the other government offices. So that's kind of the set aside, and we're working through the details to get that procurement out there and to see how far we can stretch those funds.
Right. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Terlahi. Senator Sabina.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, just I guess a quick question about the stabilization budget. I noticed some of the schools have not they're underutilizing the funds. Have you received any word about the progress in utilizing those funds?
You mean in the okay? So are you talking about the non-DOE schools?
Yeah. And is there opportunity to utilize that? Revert it back to DOE if they're not using it.
Okay, so basically what they don't receive the funds directly, but they receive that cost allocation, which then will help to support their share of the activities that are approved by USAID. So that means that what they are given in terms of the dollar amount will then be applied to their share of the personal protective equipment, technology, social emotional supports, and so forth. So once they get their allocation, they are able to prioritize how they want to use that funding share within the approved activities. So it just might reflect the status of the procurement of those activities at this point, but they are entitled to allocate that share to take advantage of the activities that are ongoing. So without any further detail on that front, for instance, we do have like iLearn, which did not want to spend their funding on equipment because they already have equipment, wanted to spend their funding in other areas. And so there may be some of that where we just haven't delivered those activities yet for those schools. But let me ask, we have our acting administrator for federal programs, Rachel Duenas, if she can add anything to why those numbers may look like they're not currently being utilized by the non-public schools.
Yes, this is Rachel Duenas, acting federal programs administrator. So we have been reaching out to the charter and private non-public schools with regard to the allocation for services. However, majority of them are reassessing based on the current situation and based on their current needs. They are also providing us or working on acquiring quotations on those services that they are needing for the revised sessions or revised services that they're in the process of looking at.
If I may, I'm going to assume, but maybe Rachel can explain. Is that reassessment due to the fact that many of our private schools were prioritizing trying to be as much face-to-face as possible as we enter the school year. Is that part of what's going on, or if you could explain what you're hearing, Rachel?
Yes, sir. So what is going on? There's several schools, charter and private non-public schools, that are reassessing how they are going to be administering their new school year. They are in the same boat with the public schools, where they possibly may not be going back into face-to-face for until January, depending on the situation. So they're looking at, for example, providing more technology supports instead of hard copy or hard copy instructional and so forth, and also acquiring more personal protective equipment in light of the teachers coming on campus to be able to just do their online instruction there. And so they're also looking at other ideas of what they have anticipated they needed earlier in the year has now shifted. So they're prioritizing areas with technology and internet access for their students, and also figuring out ways to be able to expand the services more to those students in need.
So, I think similar to ours, Senator, is that, we based our projected expenditures on having these three models in full operation for the entirety of the school year. And so, for instance, knowing that face-to-face we have not been able to do face-to-face, that means that the supplies we ordered, the face masks and so forth, are not being utilized right now. And so there may be similar reassessments of those needs so that they can shift those funds and say, we might not need as many of those, that equipment, and we can just get more laptops. And so those entities will work directly with federal programs. And I guess I just wanted to make sure that you were aware that we don't expect any funds to be unexpended unless at the end of the day they were able to receive all the services that were allowable under the grant, and just have some remainder left over. And at that point, that would then revert to the state for however the reallocation redistribution process would work.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. What is the deadline for these funds? When is the expiration date for these funds to be expended?
Rachel, I don't want to misspeak.
Yes, sure. The expiration for the performance period for this grant expires September 30, 2021.
Okay, that's good. Good to know. That means that we have some flexibility. Yeah, I think, in regards to the computers, do you feel like there's enough, with the additional 10,000, is that enough to meet the needs, current needs of the students?
Let me ask, I'll ask Joe if he wants to comment. I mean, if we are able to distribute 18,000 computers, we hope that will meet the needs of our students, recognizing that about a third of our population has already signed up for the online learning, which assumes they already have equipment at home and they're not going to be requesting equipment support from the schools or internet access. So again, when we came into this situation, we had about 30% already signed up for the online program. Now we do have students who signed up for online, then realized that we realize now we're just working from their phones. And we clarified that those students are eligible to try to, to apply for equipment, but we don't think that's a large amount, hopefully, because using your phone to do the online learning is not a preferable method for that platform.
All right. Thank you for clarifying and answering the questions, and all for your logistical efforts. That's a huge logistical effort on the part of DOE, and amongst the other things that you guys are doing. So, Suzu's Masi, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator, let me just echo that as well. I mean, the staff that are deploying it at the schools and at the central office, I mean, they are just been really great and being flexible, and it's easy to say, let's accelerate the expansion of our online platform and push out laptops, but there really is a lot that's gone into it. And so a lot of pressure, a lot of stress, I'm sure, on the front line. So thank you for recognizing those efforts.
Agamas.
Sorry. Thank you very much, Senator Paris. Senator Chaitigui?
Madam Chair. This is definitely, I'm looking at the old charts that was given to us back then, and then looking at this one today, I'm seeing that there has been some progress on it. I'm looking at the chart right now the one that says Department of Education, the Stabilization Fund. And there's a section there on project titles. It says state allocation. And then underneath it, it says 1.2 million. What is state allocation for? What is this section?
Rachel, do you want to go ahead and clarify that?
Okay, sure.
Thank you,
Yes,
Rachel.
Senator. The state allocation is a percentage that's reserved under the grant for to administer the grant services. However, the 1.2 mil does not represent the entire cost for administration of the grant. That cost represents allocation and support for ancillary personnel that are supporting the schools for distance learning. For example, the procurement office and personnel, they're all providing supports to the schools for during the COVID-19 situation. So with the support, we are providing PPE supplies, technology supplies, laptops, and peripherals and monitors, so the employees can be able to telework. There are many employees that are within the department that only have desktop computers, or they're unable to telework. So under this state allocation, we're providing all this technology support for the ancillary so they can better support the schools and all the other service that they can do remote from the office.
Oh, thank you, Rachel, for that. Superintendent, I sent that letter to you on September 21st. I sent it to you again. Some of the
I
questions.
just saw it. Thank you.
Okay, but some of the questions you can do offline because it doesn't pertain to this. But the very first question I had, and I'm glad, Rachel, you brought that up because, like I said, I've been talking to several parents and teachers as well, and I'm concerned because when we're losing some teachers because they want to retire now, especially considering this pandemic we're in, and of course your health is number one and most important. And some of the teachers are experiencing issues with trying to get some kind of assistance because not all teachers, like you said, Rachel, perfect. They don't have the facilities, and most especially they don't have the speed or the what is it technically when you're trying to get good Wi-Fi into your home to be able to go online and assist them. So my question was, how much are you assisting teachers so they can have the ability to do these online programs or teaching their students? So I know that now that I know that state allocation is assisting them, but what more are you doing for teachers to ensure they have all their equipment and Wi-Fi that's needed?
So let me clarify Rachel's earlier statement. I believe the state allocation was the portion set aside to help support some of the central office personnel who are supporting the grant, especially because of the telework requirements and the protective supplies needed. So it's almost like a percentage to support the central operations that need to go hand in hand with the grant administration functions. But I believe the funding for the teachers themselves are coming from the direct grant funds. So I'm going to ask Joe if he can address that relative to new equipment and laptops being provided for our educators, and then the other efforts being taken to address the needs and concerns of our teachers as they go through these first months.
Right.
So Joe.
Hi. Thank you, sir. Have a nice, Senator. So just to kind of put this out in order, teachers have always had laptops. So they've always had laptops that were regularly distributed to them from the department. Now, there were a number that were either not working or some teachers still needed to go through the training as to why there's a percentage of teachers or a small number of teachers who didn't have DOE issued laptops. Also, we do have a number of DOE teachers who do not want to sign up for the DOE laptop. They prefer to use their personal laptops, and that's their choice. So we know the listing, we have a number of those teachers. With COVID funding and the consolidated grant funding, we've actually purchased new laptops. So just for full disclosure, those laptops that I mentioned that teachers had some of them are 7 to 8, 9 years old, right? So of course, teachers take very good care of these laptops. That's why they last so long. more than let's say a student laptop would. So we're actually replacing the laptops that the teachers have already been issued. We're prioritizing the teachers who don't have a laptop right now for whatever reason. And again, they have a right to refuse it, but the only time that if they refuse it, then they just have to agree to use their own equipment for the purposes of department work. The second group is replacing all of the laptops that are either not functional or not working. We do have some teachers who they don't have a working camera, or the microphone's bad, things like that. And then of course the third group is everybody else. So everybody else who has a laptop from previous years can actually exchange that laptop for a new one. For the internet connectivity, we're actually putting in the budget a small percentage. We're looking at about 500 teachers who will need internet connection. And it's a very specific group. It's for that group that based on their request from their principal or whoever, that they cannot physically come onto campus because of health conditions or whatever. And then that's determined by the teacher. By the administration. All the other teachers, they basically, it's part of teleworking. So they can either go into the campus, which is available now for them to utilize. And all those schools are very strict on their safety measures, so they go on campus, or if they needed to, they could go to one of a school that's nearby, so they don't need to physically go to their school. They can actually make arrangements to if they live near another school, they can actually make arrangements with that principal to do the work at that school site. And then if they want to telework from home, they can actually do that. They would just tell the principal that I want to telework, and I'm able to do all of my assignments at home. But the caveat to that is that they would have to have their own internet access. But again, for those teachers who don't have their own internet access and who cannot come onto the campuses, that's where that funding is going to be coming out of.
Thank you, Joe, for that. Thank you so much. Superintendent, even if a teacher who doesn't have any underlying medical issues or just anxiety, with this COVID, would that individual teacher have the ability to telework at home? Even though there is no comorbidities, they're young, but still I'm hoping, what I'm trying to say is I'm just hoping that any teacher who wishes to telework at home, they're not denied that ability to do so, regardless of the reason.
So let me address that, because that's come up in a number of areas or a number of times since the beginning of the school year. So again, we definitely were very concerned about those who did have comorbidities and were considered high risk, and trying to look at telework as an accommodation. But we also believe telework should be more of an available standard work practice, given the fact that online learning is taking place, and there may be new ways in which we can anticipate the teachers working. So although we did require our teachers to report in those early weeks so that we could get organized for some of the changes that took place when there was no more face-to-face, and we had to focus on distribution of materials and so forth. We did, and I can think this is also in line with the PCOR 1 situation. We did promote telework for all teachers if they were able to do so. And again, this, so I don't know right now if there are teachers right now who are concerned that they're being denied that opportunity, but we did stress the flexibility, but it does require that those teachers are able to function at home, regarding their, doing their classes, preparing their work. I think the only some of the issues that we did receive were for those who went home and then were unable to, did not have sufficient internet access or so forth to do that work. And there are some who actually wish to be back on campus and requested so. So I believe for the most part, we've been very flexible. I think our biggest challenge was allowing teachers to come back on campus, given the PCOR 1 situation, because we had teachers who said, I like my internet, I like my classroom, I want to be back there doing my lesson, can we do that? And so we've been kind of going back and forth with the teachers to try to find the balance for all the teachers who either want to be at home and and want to be at the school. What we have to work on and kind of come to some type of agreement with the GFT is we did work on a telework agreement for the teachers to outline what the expectations were should they be at home versus reporting to school, just so we could have clarity between management and employees. And I believe there were some who were kind of concerned about, what that meant or required. And that's something we're working with the Guam Federation of Teachers to see if we can put in place something that everybody can agree on relative to telework. But we do want to see it as an option, especially during the pandemic when there's health concerns, as well as the fact that we're doing online anyways. It doesn't make sense to operate strictly by the way we used to. So I don't know if there are any particular complaints or concerns you might have heard, but our stance is to try to be as flexible as possible relative to telework.
Okay, thank you so much for that answer. Joe, did you want to say?
Yeah, if I can add to that, and when we meet with principals, I don't think this is written down anywhere, but a lot of them kind of express that if you don't need to be on campus, it's better to telework, because we have so much staff already. I mean, yeah, we're definitely doing social distancing and we're way under capacity of an entire school, but just not having all the teachers there for the photocopying and the office and all of those things, it really helps when you're trying to do the hard copies and whatnot. So kind of the rule of thumb that a lot of administrators have been using is if you don't need to physically be on campus and you're good to go at home, then they've been pretty supportive of that.
So it's safe to say that when you mentioned you have 500 teachers who may need internet service, Wi-Fi service, then that you're prepared to provide them that assistance then.
Well, not necessarily. It's the same with the students. We can't afford. Well, I guess let me take it back. We can't afford to pay for every single teacher to have internet access at home. That's 2,000 teachers. But the question is do we want to allocate those funds in that manner when a large percentage of teachers already have internet access? And here we are trying to kind of struggle to get it to students. So it's really more on a needs type basis with students and teachers, where if you need internet access and you have no other option to handle that, then we have an option for you where we can provide internet access. But just like how we're asking students and families, if you already have internet access, if you already have a laptop, please don't request for a laptop or expect a DOE to provide you one, because we know that we can't provide one to everybody. I think a good example is, like, for example, just government work now, or even this legislative session now. I mean, every DOE employee who's here is using their home internet. And it's just a matter of when we debate about it, a lot of people ask, okay, we can afford it because the CARE Act allows for it. But the question is, do we really want to allocate funds in that direction, knowing that a good percentage of teachers already have internet access? So it's really more on a needs basis. And if they telework, a good majority of the teachers already say, we're good, we have internet access and that's no problem. But if there's underlying conditions, or our teachers, our administrators have been very sensitive to the anxiety component. So if it's where there's teachers and it's a high anxiety and they have to stay home and then they don't have internet access, then it's something that we can provide. Yeah. But it's not, we won't be able to do that for every teacher who decides to telework.
Yeah, and Senator, if I could, I would say that does reflect our current stance. I mean, obviously this is a work in progress as well. So, as we go through the student, I think our priority, of course, is our students and their access, trying to get them onto those learning options, trying to account for the missing ones. And our teachers, for the most part, are participating, and we're kind of listening into what the key concerns are. So there are going to be a smaller group who may have the internet access, and we will work and kind of pay attention to that. And I think what Joe is mentioning, and it's not really at the top of the list right now, but should it be, and should there be resources available, I'm sure we can look at that. I just think that again, just like with a lot of government workers, right now we're working on WhatsApp of people's phones, and we just love the fact that people are willing to continue to work with us in that way, so that we can be safe, we can work virtually and so forth. But we're not covering the cost of anybody's phones so that they can interact by WhatsApp and It just happens to be, the way that we can work around the safety, safety situation. Because the PCOR one, as you recall, and as I recall, because I know it's been changing, but I think it still prohibits our schools from having in-person meetings, the group meetings that used to occur. So our principals are not able to have faculty meetings and so forth the way you might, and that makes sense. But again, then you have to resort to the virtual methods. So far we're okay, I think, but we'll monitor and we'll keep an eye on those issues as we go through the year.
Thank you, Superintendent, and thank you, Joe, for the answers you've given me. And this chart that you provided, it's very helpful. You go through these individual schools on what federal fund. Is Rachel still there? Okay, thank you so much for that. And it would be helpful to have something on this section on what you're doing to help the teachers, to do their job safely, and what kind of funding that you're providing them. So Doris is waving. Do you need something to? Okay.
Well,
okay.
Senator, Doris is waving because she's actually in charge of distributing all the personal protective equipment. So, from the standpoint of the face-to-face, that was our priority. And so I just want to clarify, because I know there were some social media, back and forth about, we only got 5 masks and so, well, we actually have prepared, and these plans might change just because face-to-face is obviously not going to be there the entire year. But when we first initially planned this, we were planning for sufficient numbers of masks, ongoing supplies of hand sanitizers and cleaning supplies to really focus in on the safety at the schools. And so that really was our priority. And then on the online side, that's something where we're now growing and looking at those issues now that we're relying more on the online platform. So we'll monitor that side. But again, I think Doris, because of all the protective supplies, she knows exactly how many boxes of things are, going to schools to support, teachers who are on campus in terms of their direct safety.
Thank you, Mr. Fernandez, for that, because that was my next question on the category that says health and safety. I see it here, and I've also heard that the schools didn't get a lot, because like you said earlier, teachers are wanting to come into the school. And we know that certain schools have been shut down because someone is tested positive at that school, so nobody can show up. But when they come back, they want to be able to ensure that they have the masks, they have the hand sanitizers, and anything else they need in order for them to come into school to do that. So yeah, that was some of the concerns I have too. I thank you. I think I put my time out, and I appreciate, Superintendent, the letter I sent to you. If you can send me some of those answers, it'd be very helpful, as we prepare for the next oversight or informational briefing from DO.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Doris. Keep them safe, Doris. Make sure, keep our teachers safe. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Taitigui. Senator Torres?
Thank you. I was just wondering, Mr. Fernandez, do you anticipate a change in the number of families that would opt for online education as opposed to face-to-face? Or do you think that with the demographics, say if they were to open up more and more and allow face-to-face, the schools to open, do you think that there might be a switch? Or how are you proceeding with your thresholds right now?
So, right. So those are two good questions. So the first question with regard to face-to-face moving to online, well, we were confronted with that automatically from day one. I think some of the private schools who opened earlier were at least able to get in a couple of days or a week, but we were never able to go face-to-face. So our schools have had to offer our face-to-face students the opportunity to go either to hard copy or to online as an immediate transition. But I think Joe articulated it earlier, is that, if it were up to us in an ideal situation, we would either have face-to-face or online. And the hard copy is really kind of our compromise type of accommodation to try to enable students to go ahead and stay home. But if they don't have online access or equipment, this is our way of trying to continue to support their education. But ideally, what would have happened is that the face-to-face students would have, are going to be either online or hard copy during this interim period. And then those who signed up for the hard copy, we really would rather have you online. So if it's a matter of getting you the computer That's our effort. Let's get you on the online option so that eventually, especially if we can address the internet access, we can only have two options of either you go face to face, or if that's not possible, then it's an online option. And then going forward, we don't anticipate. I don't see us, eliminating the online option in our schools going forward. I think we're going to learn a lot. I think our teachers are going to get more proficient. Our families are going to get more proficient with the online platform, especially as we expand it and have experience with it. So whenever we do come back to reopen for face-to-face, I would anticipate that at least, especially in those early stages, it would not be a full return. There would be that online option for parents and students. And then again, even as we get past COVID-19, I think what we're learning this year will lead us to, I would hope, incorporate and integrate the online option for students, going forward. So it really is something that we're learning from, and we don't anticipate going away, very soon, and not simply a COVID-19 accommodation.
Yeah, I mean, I was just bringing it up as a practical point, because as people say we start transitioning into more opening up, that would require parents to not be at home. And so the model, of course, there's some that have that advantage, but it's just a matter of economics, really. And I think some children are suffering from not having face-to-face for many reasons, right? Either access to food, or access to health counselors, or just access to the emotional support. But no, so I guess your paradigm is just what's planned is going to go into effect for the immediate near future anyways. Or the
right. So as long as we're not able to do face-to-face, our goal is to try to expand the online option as much as possible, and enable kids to have the option, the opportunity through equipment and through internet access. Now, when we go back to face-to-face, again, I think I see your point, which is, in a situation like that, we anticipate that the economy is reopening as well, because we would see the public health conditions being in a much better place. For that reason, even though it's not a driving reason necessarily, we did prioritize the older students for online learning. So in the event that they didn't want to return face-to-face, they want to have an online option, but their parents still needed to go to work, that the older students would be better situated for independent online learning, and not, and just be better positioned to get a quality education using the online option, and give parents, again, that choice and that option without really impeding their ability to go to work. With the younger kids, whether they're online or not, we know that presents a more difficult challenge, because I think parents are not going to be able to leave their younger kids at home unsupervised. So they're more likely to be the ones who need to come back face-to-face should the economy open and parents need to go back to work. So that is incorporated into the thinking on how to prioritize the older and younger students for technology. But we do know that the elementary school families are still asking, when are we going to get our computer for our younger students? So we'll sort through that after we tackle the secondary level and see how far we get. But down the road, if things reopen, maybe there will be some students of high school parents who say, my kid's doing well, they enjoy it, they don't want to necessarily go back face-to-face. So can we keep this as an option? And our plan is to say yes, we should keep this as an option, and the more who can participate it and have that option, the better.
Yeah, fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Torres. Mr. Superintendent, I know it was planned to purchase some new books and textbooks for our students through the CARES Act funds. Have any of those been received or distributed?
Let me go ahead and turn that over to Joe. He's monitoring that.
No, unfortunately not. The expected timeline for those is November, December. So we hope to have the technology in by late November, early December, as well as the textbooks.
Okay, thank you very much for that update. And we discussed in previous informational hearings about the use of the CARES Act funding to support emotional and mental well-being for both our students and teachers during this time. Can you give us an update, Mr. Superintendent?
Well, I know that we have some of the internal capacity to go ahead and, to have done some of that over the summer and in the beginning of the school year, really just providing some training sessions for our teachers and staff. A lot of our focus early on was really our students coming back into the classroom and using those first weeks. Has really been a different situation now that they're all either hard copy where there isn't that interaction or they're online. I'm going to ask Doris if she wants to add anything, because I know that there has been a need to reach out to students and check on our students. I know that she, and I know as well our school psychologists have also done that student outreach. But maybe as part of that, we can talk a little bit about the use of our CARES funds for additional supports.
Okay, thank you, sir. Good morning, senators, chair. So what I'd like to start with is, yes, as the superintendent pointed out, in the summer and in preparation for the opening, we did actually, the district psychologists with the counselors, we did provide some training with school site employees as well as central employees on coping strategies with the current pandemic. As well as certain red flags to look for in anticipation for face-to-face or the distance learning. So as the teachers were actually doing class time, they might be able to identify if a student was struggling or having some issues, and then try to work with that student one-on-one. Since we've gone totally distance learning, we actually have our counselors doing tele counseling. Or telework. And so they're actually making phone calls or emailing students on their list. For example, we might have secondary schools with multiple counselors. They would be reaching out specifically or one-to-one with those students. We also have made arrangements for them to work with, for example, at-risk kids. If they were on kind of like the radar last year, these are the kids that we really needed to follow up with. We've also been partnering with behavioral health, Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness. Last year, we did get our own internal or built our own capacity for those to become trained trainers of the youth mental health first aid. Of course, we're using this particular model to, again, help us identify and then also work with those students, providing supports. So we've trained all the counselors. We're actually trying to work with behavioral health now to get more materials and offer more training to the teachers as well as support staff. In addition, with the CARES funds, we're hoping to get specific counselors, the district psychologists who actually be certified in telehealth, specifically for therapy and counseling, while they are certified to actually do it online or via some kind of social platform. So we are in the works of that. You don't actually see that on the report that was provided to you, and that's only because we're really trying to determine which one would be the best vendor to work with or possibly put in. We didn't just want to pick anything off of, the internet. Oh, this looks good. We kind of wanted to make sure we were going with, something that would work for us here on Guam. Okay, and as soon as the Peak Core 2 comes back into place, the social workers who I am also in charge with, we hope to get back out and start making contact one-on-one, especially with the families we're having extreme challenges with.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm glad to hear that, and all the adapting you're doing to meet the needs of the students and the staff of DOE. Thank you very much for that. Mr. Superintendent, we can move to the next topic.
Senator Shelton, can I just say something?
Of course, Madam Chair.
Okay, just for your information, the National Association of State Board of Education has awarded the Guam Education Board $4,000 stipend grant to train teachers in the early childhood on its social and emotional learning. So we were they were only awarding 2 states. So Guam is one of the states, and that's under the Guam Education Board. So I just want to let you know the MOU has been signed and that the team that superintendent has appointed are ready to start. So they will be conducting the training to the teachers in the early childhood.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and congratulations to the department for receiving that grant. Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Superintendent, let's move on to the status update of enrollment of unaccounted students.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. During the summer, the GDOE required students to register for one of the three models of learning for the school year. And as I recalled earlier, it was either online, a hard copy, or face-to-face. And as we went through the registration process, this wasn't a survey, really it actually was a student by student registration. So we got an early count of those students who were able to respond and register, but there were approximately 4,000 students who failed to do so during the summer. We knew that going into the school year, but we anticipated that many, if not most of these students would be identified and registered when they came in person during the first couple of weeks of school. So, we thought maybe their contact information wasn't working, but once they came back to school, we would update it and do our normal processes. Once we saw the kids physically back in school on the first days. However, due to return of the island to PCOR 1, students were not allowed to report to school, and GDOE has had to reach out via telephone and email to contact these students. So over the summer, the responsibility really was at the staff level, the administrative staff who were still on duty during the summer. And then as the teachers returned, our teachers began to take that over to try to reach out to contact students and parents. And even after that, through the first few weeks of the school year, there still remained approximately 2,800 students unable to be reached. So since then, after giving the teachers and staff and all the schools an opportunity to do that outreach, we've turned the effort over to our social workers and student attendance officers who are currently leading the effort to locate and contact the remaining students, but of course working with their assigned schools. As of October 5th, today, our employees were able to work with schools to bring the numbers of missing students down by about 1,100 students, leaving approximately 1,750 students still to be contacted. Of these remaining students, we had about 786 of them who are students for whom that contact information is no longer working. So again, we were able to reach around 1,100 students already. An additional 786 calls and contacts have been attempted, but there hasn't been a response. And these are the students who would likely require home visits, but that we are unable to do right now during PCOR 1. So those students, again, are earmarked for home visitation by our social workers and our school teams as needed. The remaining students are still in the process of receiving initial outreach by our social worker and student attendance officer teams. So again, that outreach has already taken place at the schools between staff and teachers, but now we asked our social workers and student attendance officers to try again and to really just validate that they were unable to reach them. And if they are unable to be reached, they then would move to that home visit list. So we hope that it'll get below that 1,750 number, but that's where we are today. And we will, calls are still being made to try to reach these families. The Mayor's Council of Guam has offered its assistance, and they've been on call, I would say, maybe for the past 2 to 3 weeks. But we really asked our social workers and our SAOs to take the first shot at ensuring that we had done what we needed to do within our school employees to update the information about our missing students. There is some FERPA restrictions relative to the sharing of student information, so we definitely wanted to make sure that we took care of as much as we could. But there are exceptions under FERPA, which in the instance of either health or other emergency situations, that we can share information in a limited way to enable us to establish contact and ensure the well-being of our students. And in this situation, I think it's justified, knowing that those students who may not be in contact with schools may not also be in contact with other supports in the community that they may need during this pandemic situation. At the elementary level, as of today, the schools with the most missing students include Juan M. Guerrero with 66, JQ San Miguel with 59, Price with 53, Attica with 28, and Finnegassen with 22. At the middle school level, the schools with the most missing students include Benavente with 96, Jose Rios with 76, FB Leon Guerrero with 70, and Agata with 63. And at the high school level, the schools with the most missing students include Simon Sanchez with 458, Southern with 148, and GW with 141. So that's where we are today, and we been talking with our team. Doris is actually kind of the lead on this for now working with our student attendance officers as well and our schools, and we'll see if we can answer any other questions that you might have. But at this point, one of the biggest difficulties again is being under PCOR 1, where we would normally be doing home visits. That's not something we've authorized to have our employees do at this point until our public health situation improves. One other note is that maybe Doris can provide information later, but we are working to access the global dorm as well. We know there are homeless families at the global dorm, and we're working on a couple of different fronts to get the information needed to ensure that those kids are accounted for. And we believe that if they're not currently accounted for, they are within that 1750 number for all of our students. So that's the latest update that we have on this front. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Superintendent. Is there any way of knowing from those numbers if some of those students may have opted for their own homeschool program or transferred out of the public school system?
Let me ask Doris if she wants to go ahead and share what she's learned.
Yes, so we actually have come across through our phone calling that some students actually have moved attendance areas or need to transfer or complete withdrawal and transfer processes. We've actually been communicating with the various schools. Of course, there are procedures in place that require things like a mayor's verification, et cetera. But in the past, my outreach teams would still provide, I guess, what you would call temporary residential certification. Because of the home visit restriction, that's kind of up in the air right now. However, we are communicating with both schools, the exiting school and the entering school, letting the principals know that, hey, there's a student, heads up, please put that name on your roster. And then as soon as PCOR 1 status changes, we will go and do all of the official paperwork. But at least they are accounted for. And so they're off the no show or no count list.
Okay,
and technically speaking, we do have the ability to track those types of withdrawals through our PowerSchool system. We know there are typically codes that show when someone withdrawn from the school amongst their records, or so forth. So we hope that these are captured, but if not, it's most likely due to the fact that we have not been able to physically, interact, or that might have hampered the exchange of documents and so forth. So that's been one of the challenges.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'll open it up questions from my colleagues. Senator Perez.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So yeah, I was thinking about, has there been any attempts to look at perhaps using curriculum to help address some of these unaccounted students? So I know in some of the discussions that I had with you regarding more of a magnet school approach, a more tailored approach to kind of address more of the interests of these students, and maybe even like a place-based, project-based type of curriculum that can take place in their residences, perhaps, that's more amenable to something like that.
Yeah, no, I know that you and I know Joe Sanchez have talked a little bit about this, but I guess part of that is making assumptions about what we know about the kids so far, and we're still in that process of gathering, but you're headed down the right direction. Like, again, the issue is, why aren't these students in touch with their schools? I mean, during the summer, we said, well, it's the summertime. People aren't thinking about it. Maybe they'll think about it as they get through the summer, or all of a sudden they'll hear that school has started and they'll show up. So those dynamics definitely didn't play into this year because we never were able to have them show up at school. And then, of course, over the course of the first month, you're anticipating that more and more will, get the picture, connect with the schools, we'll connect them, we'll call them, and then they will be, they will connect with the right platform of learning. But I think what you're hinting at and what worries us is that, again, I think as I mentioned, it is that those who have been disconnected from their schools for this long during this school year, during a time which they know they should be in school, there may be other things going on relative to their household situation, family situation, interest in coming back to school, various things that we're not quite sure of, but definitely are worrisome types of things that, would lead us to believe that even as we establish contact, there may be different approaches necessary to not only catch them back up, but really deal with some of those underlying challenges if we continue to operate in a pandemic environment with distance learning being our key strategy. So I haven't really thought through the curriculum side of that approach but it is relevant. I don't know, Joe, if you have anything you want to add, but I do thank you for that because it is down the road as to how we're thinking about these families that if they're not connected by now, something's going on, whether they're just disengaged from the school system or their families have had a difficulty reconnecting because of other health and safety or income priorities. So we're not really sure yet what's going on, but we definitely will keep that in mind. I don't know, Joe, if you wanted to add anything from because you and I have talked about this as well.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that we know that under normal circumstances, or even in this current situation, we have contact with students who are still kind of disengaged. So we have online students now who are still disengaged. But this particular definition of students who we have not contacted, it's more than just that. It's not disinterest in school or whatnot. They're probably experiencing some very difficult, challenging times beyond the curriculum that we're trying to address. Either, I think, I'm not sure if Doris mentioned it, but sometimes it's homelessness or having to move. The mayors have already told us that some families were not able to pay their rent and they had to move overnight, or some really difficult situation. And I don't know if Mr. Fernandez mentioned it, but there are some families that have been in communication with the mayors or even other services that just said, hold on, we're not able to do with school right now. So this is a whole new group of students. I would say the most at risk of the at risk, because even the ones who you could say are disengaged, there's some contact. There's some contact with them. Either we've contacted them by phone or they've responded and they're not, I think Ms. Deputy Cruz has a very strict definition where if you have a phone contact and you've spoken to the mom or you've spoken to the child, that's not considered no contact. I mean, it may be very limited contact, but there is a connection to the school. These folks that we're talking about now are literally no connection at all, and that's what makes us so worried.
Right.
Yeah, I think, going back to, I think some of the previous discussions about community learning centers, at least providing some space in whatever villages they're living at the time. I think, bringing the school to them, I think more effort needs to be made to do that. And I think also the tool of the internet, I think we can utilize it even more because we can have a broader reach to more expertise. If we're dealing with health issues, mental health issues, there's so much resources that we can tap into that are not based here on Guam. And, I really want to encourage perhaps even looking beyond what's here on Guam to address these longstanding issues when it comes to mental health. I think there's so much that can be done with this platform. In addition to distributing the curriculum, implementing the curriculum from a perspective with a brick and mortar type of school, this platform can definitely be expanded to bring in the expertise that can where we can materialize more of this tailored type of approach for our students. But yes, I think the material definitely needs to be addressed, I think thank you.
Oh, Senator, we appreciate that. I think you're going down the lines of a lot of our discussions relative to the needs of students, the variety of needs. In this case, I just would say, again, I try to be as optimistic as possible, but I think the realistic approach is that we're going to have an aftermath to deal with through this pandemic. So it's not really just a matter of us contacting these students. We know other districts are having the same issue. The question is how do we get to this point where we've got 1,700 students with no contact with their schools, and their schools are really essential community connections, assets. So if that's the case, what's to say that they're connected with any of the other supports that we would assume they would connect with, whether it's for healthcare purposes, other welfare purposes, housing purposes, and so forth. So I think there will be an aftermath that we'll have to address. And again, Doris is at the forefront of this because we're trying to deal with that 1,700, get those numbers down, cross our fingers and hope it goes down. But in reality, I'm sure we'll have over 1,000 students, maybe 1,500 students that are still going to be in this category of let's go visit them at their homes and see what is happening, to assure that nothing worse is, occurring. Will be a period of high trauma for many of these families is what we anticipate. And so, but we thank you for that question. It goes to the heart of, what we're going to be dealing with after we go through this process.
Yeah, I think that's something I like to encourage is more of the interagency collaboration with the Department of Public Health. And, this could be the beginnings of more of the community centers, the community health centers, where we're addressing the issues holistically, the health. And I know Department of Education has been very good at providing food for our students. A big part of a student's meals are basically accomplished through Department of Education. So, I think that's
yes, absolutely. And even on the healthcare side, we're looking at ways that we might be able to, should the government maintain a higher reimbursement rate for Medicaid, there is a possibility of even being involved in providing some healthcare support to families, in certain areas and with certain needs. So we do agree with that approach.
Okay, I'm looking forward to more conversations and working out these solutions further. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Perez. Senator Taitigui.
And thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I think the greatest thing for DOE to do right now is to stay in close contact with the mayors. I mean, they're the heartbeat of every village. They will definitely know the ins and outs of what's going on in their village, and greatly appreciate bringing them into the mix of this. I mean, every step of the way. The media had mentioned it was like 1 out of every 10 students not attending school. I mean, so could you explain that? Because right now you're saying 1,700. So what is the total count today? I mean, is it 1,700 or it is 1,700?
It's around, it's just over 1,700. But again, early on, the media has been tracking some of this since the beginning of the school year. So early on, maybe the first week of school, we were tracking about 4,000. And over the weeks, as we've continued our outreach efforts, that number's gone down. So I think when the media reported it out, it was about 2,800 students. And now it's down another 1,100. So we're making progress and hopefully we'll continue. But we still anticipate there will be some who we still need to get out to the homes and see what's going on.
17 is still not a sigh of relief, but it is definitely further down from what was reported first time. It's quite alarming. I mean, it's just, and if this starts to get better, having to get these students to catch up takes a little bit more time too as well. They're behind on it. But no other questions. I think you guys are doing a great job to pull from mayors, like I said, and social workers to help assist this, and looking for those students that may need some help beyond, what DOE can provide, but what the government can help provide for them as well. Okay, thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Taitigui. Senator Torres.
Thank you. Wow, what sobering discussion this is. The realities that you face, and quite a big task. I think, what concerns me too is that aside from everything else, it is against the law, as education is compulsory on Guam. And Joe, good job with working with the mayors. And I think that, it's true. All those people that touch on this public health, anyone that processes, aid to these families. I mean, the message is they have to come back. And if there's some way that we can help you with that effort, because I think part of it is an educational effort. There is no option to not go to school or to go to school. And I think maybe people are taking for granted that fact in these austere times, right? It's kind of the harsh reality, but bottom line is, whatever we can do to help you get that message out that it's against the law to not go to school and you must go to school. That's where I think every single faith-based organization, public health, everybody, even police patrolling and seeing kids that are, wandering. We got to get them back on, and, God bless all of you really for your efforts. It's incredible what you're doing, and just reading all the material, your plans are just, it takes a lot of effort, and I commend you all for that, that great effort.
Thank you very much, Senator Torres. And yes, again, thank you to the department for all the work that you're doing. Of course, we're very concerned about these students who are not enrolled at this time. And even when we get out of this PCOR 1 situation and you finally find these students, the amount of instruction time that they've missed, and just the catch-up time that is going to be needed, and the trickle effects that will have on the rest of their education, we're gonna see those effects happening. So we want to stop it before it happens. So thank you very much for your efforts. Oh yes, Mr. Sanchez.
Hi, Madam Chair and Senator Camacho. I want to just Senator Torres, just to let you know, the teachers and administrators have started. We started that hard discussion regarding how to approach compulsory ed, with regards to attendance and now even grading. So as you probably know, in the beginning of the year, our approach to get students back was really, hey, we're supporting you. We need you to come back. We're going to do everything we can to accommodate your needs and so on. And now as we've progressed and we have a large percentage of our students and families back in school, we are having that very difficult conversation about, this is compulsory ed. This is not a choice. When schools are open, even if we're open virtually, it's still the responsibility of the students and the parents to engage with the school. And right now we're still kind of at that point where we're trying to be supportive and, be more encouraging them to come in, as well as to participate. But, now as we get towards, for example, first quarter grades are coming up. And the question is, what are we going to do with all of these students who have literally no grade? There's no grade, or the ones who are enrolled have not turned any work in. Now, of course, it's first quarter, so we have a little bit of flexibility. But once we get to the second quarter, which is actually first semester, that's when their grades actually have a consequential impact, because that's what's officially recorded. So, we're trying hard conversations about social promotion. Like, for example, what happens if these students don't show up all year? Do they automatically go to the next grade level with no evidence of any work? As well as, if we do know that there are some families that are registered but do not engage, like, for example, we do have communication with them, like I mentioned, but they don't pick up the packets, they don't log on to the classes. And if those are marked off as attendance, issues, to what extent do we want to approach that, more from an enforcement standpoint rather than just a supportive standpoint? And, I know we're all, our hearts are out to our community and out to our students, but, at the same time, we have to hold students and families accountable to these laws. But yeah, it's not a difficult conversation, but I just want to let you know that we're having it. We've started it, and there's no consensus yet, but the teachers and administrators are thinking about that.
And I get it, Joe. I mean, I've got 10 grandkids, 8 on Guam, and I'm helping their parents navigate it. And it is tough as hell. It really is, not only on the parents, but on the kids. And we've had that hard discussion that you don't have a choice. You're going to wake up and you're going to do this. It's really tough. But bottom line is, they have to do it, and they're going to be forced to do it. And thank you for bringing up social promotion, because that's my biggest fear with all of this. Is, we're not going to do them any good if we don't hold them to going to school. But, I'm there to support you in whatever way. And
Senator, we have and all of the senators on the committee, it's a very tough balancing act, as you can tell this year. Come to school, hold you accountable, be in attendance, but we can't penalize. We don't know that we want to penalize you and give you a more incentive not to show up. But again, at the heart of all of this as well is a lot of discussions about equity, and about equity now in this particular environment, equity around distance learning, equity about actually just even enrolling in school. I mean, who are the families that are out there that are that disconnected, we're seeing them in a completely different lens than you would during a normal school year. So I think that's really something again that we're focused on when it comes to grading attendance and so forth. That we've got such a small island, but students come from so many different backgrounds to a school system that is going through a major shift and change in how we operate. And we want to make sure that all kids have access to that. And that's been such a challenge this year. So that's our continued effort. And we hope that that's in line with all of your efforts as well. We do want to bring everybody back to a school system that can continue to support them. And we're here right now. We're not there yet, but we'll continue to work in that direction.
I'm so happy to hear that. You're absolutely right. Equity is it's what's kept kids, even in Seattle, which is highly technical, from going back to. Yeah, no, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Senator Torres. Mr. Sanchez, you touched on something about students who are enrolled. You do have communication with them, but because maybe knowing of the leniency during this time or transportation issues, whatever it may be, these are concerns the committee has actually received from some teachers who are worried about reaching these students. So can you just tell us what kind of efforts can be made to reach them? I know you're talking about the compulsory education, but what else is being done?
Yeah, so right now, and I believe a lot of those concerns are very true, because we're getting that from all the schools, and we're getting that from a lot of our teachers, and we have a weekly meeting with teacher leaders on these matters. So some of the biggest way that we're approaching it now is looking at a series of grading policies that we have in place. Is how do we grade fairly the difference between online instruction and hard copy instruction. That's one thing, is you want to make sure that it's equitable, but at the same time that it's fair and as accurate as possible. The second one is our effort to move into the online version as much as possible. And this is also not just immediately, but this is an anticipation of if and when we do move into face-to-face. Is when we do have face-to-face, what we hope is that we do not need to have that hard copy component available, because for a variety of reasons. Number one, we know it's very difficult to manage, again, logistically, but two, we also know that it's not very effective. And even with the most, because it requires mostly independent work, right? It's almost like homeschooling for 100%. That even with the best, most engaged, the students that put in the most effort, it's still very challenging, because you have limited access to your teachers. You don't have that normal immediate feedback, where sometimes, when you're face-to-face, you can get feedback immediately within minutes. If it's online, you can get feedback within days. With regards to the hard copy, is if a teacher is supposed to write feedback to the student, they wouldn't get it until as early as the following week. So the time difference of communication is very difficult. So we do want to move away from hard copy as quickly as we can. And I think we can address the issue of equity. Is the reason why hard copy exists, as we know, is because we didn't have the capacity at the time to give them the technology necessary for them to participate in the online component. But now we believe that if we do open online or face-to-face, we can say, you still have the online option. That's an option that we're going to keep open, but you do not have a hard copy option. However, if you are inclined to be concerned about health or safety, and you do not want to physically come onto campus, then we can offer you, and you don't have internet access or a computer, then we now have the capacity to offer that to them, as opposed to having to resort to the hard copy component. So yeah, those are some of the things that we're trying to address the challenges with hard copy right now.
And for the students who are currently on hard copy curriculum, who are not picking up their packets, are you seeing that a big cause of that is because they don't have transportation to and from the school, their parents?
That's one of it. Yeah. So one of the challenges is sometimes it's transportation. Sometimes it's it's related to transportation. If you have to go to too many different places at once, and you only have transportation for one day, sometimes you miss it, and so on. The only thing that we do in that situation is we try to let the families know always just reach out to the school, because although the schools have a schedule, there's always a chance for them to accommodate a particular request. It's just a matter of calling the school and trying to say, hey, I missed the hard copy pickup. Is there a way that I can pick it up, tomorrow or something? And, there's always someone who can help and try to meet up with them at a particular time.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that you are making those accommodations. Thank you very much. And to all of you here today from the Department of Education, Sidious Masi, for your time, for all of the updates on these different topics. And I'm sure we will continue these conversations in the coming months. Any updates that you might have to share with us and the public moving forward. Congratulations on the ending of the first quarter, and Sidious Masi for all of your work, and to all of the teachers out there listening for adapting and for getting it done. And of course, we must acknowledge again the parents and all of the families who are helping to continue the education at home. Thank you very much. With that, if there are no further questions from any of my colleagues here, I'd like to conclude this virtual information briefing. The committee will receive any testimonies that anyone would like to give to our offices. And this hearing will be available on our YouTube channel and rebroadcast on TV channel 21 or channel 117 on Docomo. I'd like to thank my colleagues for all being here today and for participating with us. The time now is 11:57 a.m. and we are adjourned. Sidious Masi.
Thank you.